Caribbean Advanced Proficiency Examination Body requires that all candidates become familiar with the following sociology perspective: consensus, functionalist, conflict, Marxist, interactionist, and the feminist. Candidates should be able to show some relationship between the Caribbean and the framework of each perspective highlighted. An understanding of the listed sociological theories stated above should help in the understanding of the aesthetics of Caribbean culture and history. Let's first evaluate Max Weber and Karl Marx's conflict theory. Weber and Marx both agreed with the idea that coercion rather than consensus is what maintains social order. Marx in his thesis suggested that there exists a two-tier system. This two-tier system included 1. The proletariats and 2. The bourgeoisie. Marx suggested that the bourgeoisie and the proletariats were both struggling for the control of the means of economic production. Both Weber and Marx agreed that wealth is important in any given society. The problem according both exists when wealth is controlled by a few members of society. They share similar opinions which suggest that in addition to wealth, power and status are also important and that in every society there is a struggle between different social groups. The struggles and differences between different social groups were primarily due to the uneven distribution of wealth, power and status. Conflict theorists share the common view that the world is evolving. This evolution has resulted in social conflict and dissent. The ultimate aim of many is power. One way of maintaining power is the control of wealth. It was suggested that, if you control the wealth of any society, you possess the ability to dominate the poor. Those considered poor has no hope of gaining power, thus they are considered powerless. According to the conflict theory, the powerless remains under the control of the powerful, wealthy. In general, the conflict theory considers power as the core of all social relationships. Karl Marx, while agreeing with the main tenets of the conflict theory, he was of the view that power is gained through economics. Marx argued that the economic struggle between the haves and have-nots have resulted in social conflict. Karl Marx suggested the following in his explanation as to why conflicts exist in any society. 1. Alternative to functionalism. 2. Macro-sociological theoretical perspective. 3. Resentment and hostility are constant elements of society. 4. Power differences among social classes. 5. Special interest groups fight over scarce resources of society. 6. Interest groups fight to gain advantages over others. 7. Competition puts society off balance until dominant group gains control and stability through power. Karl Marx considered himself as a humanist. He lived between 1818 through to 1883. Karl Marx believed that humans can reach their full potential and that humans make their own history. Karl Marx suggested that humans seek to control material production. This has influenced the division of labor and the formation of several economic social classes. As a result of these social classes, a conflict exists in society. According to Marx, society seeks to combine material and ideal factors/structural and cultural factors. Thus the wealthy and powerful control all aspects of society. As stated before, the two-tier social class system, bourgeoisie, owners of the means of production, and the proletariat, workers, struggle to outdo each other, thus not focusing on the making society organized. Karl Marx in his thesis argued about the fact that the bourgeoisie, owners of the means of production, did little work but control the bulk of the monies earned as a result of the work done by the proletariat, workers. Marx highlighted the fact that class differences had a lot to do with possession of personal property. He believed the exploited should become conscious and unite, creating a revolution which eliminates the existing class struggle. This was to become the Communist Manifesto. Karl Marx was of the view that if society pool all resources together and produce, the profits should be shared equally. He believed that no class should exist. Both the owners and the workers should be rewarded the same. Marx believes this move should help to eliminate poverty. Beggars and homelessness would never exist. He believes that the state should control all avenues of production. Thus, everyone in society would benefit from the earned profit. Karl Marx had several other posits on society. Marx also believed that females should participate in production. He was against the idea of not allowing females to work. He believes they have their energy to contribute to the building of any society, and thus should not be prevented from working based on cultural practices. Marx also suggested that should the society depend on the state to supply all basic needs, and eliminate the hope factor for a better day, religion should not have a role to play in society. It was suggested by Marx that the real purpose of religion is hope for a better day to come. Marx suggested that should the state provide all the needed resources for its citizen. Max Weber, who lived 1864 to 1920, agreed with Marx. Economics played a central role in power distinction. Weber believed in two other factors. Weber suggested that social prestige, status. Weber suggested that someone could be poor and still hold a lot of power because of social prestige. Weber also suggested that political influence also has a part to play in the structure of society class system. Weber suggested that in reality many people in public office has great power, but does not earn a big salary. Although logical in reasoning, the conflict theory has several criticisms. 3 criticisms of conflict theory. 1. Ignores other ways, that is non-forceful ways in which people reach agreements. 2. Sides with people who lack power. 3. Focuses on economic factors as the sole issue for all conflict in society. 4. Differences in power are in all types of interaction. 5. Power used to be physical, but now, it's legal and economic. So what is the functionalist/consensus theory? This theory was put forward by Talcott Parsons. He was born in 1902 to parents with strong religious convictions. His father was a pastor. He was born in Colorado. Talcott attended Amherst College and began his studies into the field of biology and later became interested in economics and sociology. Talcott graduated from Amherst in 1924 and a year later entered the London School of Economic. He was greatly influenced by Max Weber. During the 1950s and 1960s, functionalism reigned as the dominant theoretical perspective in sociology. Functionalism, which is often referred to as structural functionalism, had a dual focus on the structural forces. This theory seeks to explain how human behavior is shaped and the attention given to system needs. Contributors to the functionalist perspective are Talcott Parsons and Robert Merton. The most significant intellectual forerunners of functionalism were Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, Emile Durkheim, and Max Weber. Talcott Parsons believed that social system is made from the interaction of humans and is affected by the individual's social environment. Parsons wanted to describe logical types of social relations applicable to all groups, small and large. Parsons believed that in society several struggles exist. These struggles included, 1. Realism v. Idealism. According to Parsons, idealist, an act is always a process in time, and that the concept end always implies a future reference to a state or situation that does not exist yet. Another set of viewpoints which existed were, 2. Realism v. Nominalism. Realism, the relations between actors are essentially the structure of the social system. 3. Idealism v. Materialism. Materialist, interrelated parts contribute to the functioning of the whole system. Parsons' ground theory on functionalism suggested that all of social behavior, everywhere, throughout history, and the end result was structure functionalism. According to Parsons, functionalism has 2 basic assumptions, namely 1. Interdependent parts, this is society's institutions, religion, education, politics, etc., that are all linked together. A change in one institution leads to a change in other parts. In order to function properly, the system will seek equilibrium, or stability. He also assumed that, 2. General consensus on values, which refers to members of society must having a general agreement on issues of right and wrong, basic values, and morality issues in order to function properly. In his theory, Parsons suggested that functionalism explained social change as a result of such variables as population growth and increased technology. Rapid change within the system is not something the functionalist approach is geared to handle. He also suggested that society's institutions should try to restore themselves to a state of equilibrium, Balance. When carefully considered, we can assume that Parsons was not aware of the rationalists' conception of society. He includes no power struggles in society. Parson envisions a utopian society of consensus and agreement. Every society is relatively persistent, stable structure of elements. In summary of Parsons' functionalist theory, one can assume the following. 1. Every society is a well-integrated structure of elements. 2. Every element in a society has a function. That is, contributes to the maintenance. 3. Every function in the social structure is based on a consensus of values between members. The interactionalist theory was first put forward by George Herbert Mead, 1934, but published by Herbert Blumer in 1969, his student after his death. The underlined philosophies of this theory suggested: O meaning evolves from gestures, an action which produces a response in another. O language is a set of shared meaning. O taking the role of the generalized other defined as the ability to extend interpersonal. The interactionalist theory consists of three related perspectives. In sociology, interactionism is a theoretical perspective that derives social processes, such as conflict, cooperation, identity formation, from human interaction. It is the study of how individuals act within society. Interactionist theory has grown in the latter half of the 20th century and has become one of the dominant sociological perspectives in the world today. Interactionism was first linked to the work of James Parker. George Herbert Mead, as an advocate of pragmatism and the subjectivity of social reality, is considered a leader in the development of interactionism. Herbert Blumer expanded on Mead's work and coined the term symbolic interactionism. According to the social interactionalist, human behavior is a product of the way we interpret the social world on a daily basis. This theory focuses on how the social world is created and recreated by people going about their lives. It suggests that the way in which people interpret and give meaning to the behavior of others is a significant factor in the understanding of the social world. This theory also suggests that society is an elaborate fiction that we create in order to help us to make sense of the bewildering range of behavior that we experience on a daily basis. Society does not have an objective existence, as such, since it is experienced subjectively by people. This theory also suggests that social life consists of people interacting, that is, behaving with reference to each other, taking note of the way people behave towards each other, setting up mutual expectations, or norms, and then acting with reference to these norms. The concept of categorization is important because people classify various similar phenomena in their daily lives in order to make sense of these phenomena. The process of labeling, giving names to the phenomena we classify, is significant because the labels we create, mother, criminal, insane and the like, help us to define, or stereotype, the nature of the social categories we create. In modern societies, people tend to behave towards each other on the basis of the labels that each person attracts from others. According to this theory, some labels are termed master labels because they are so powerful they condition every aspect of our behavior towards the person so labeled. Examples of master labels in our society might be criminal, homosexual, heterosexual, mad and so forth. The labels we attract, either through choice, achievement, or through being given them, ascription, are important because people's knowledge of a label serves to unlock the assumptions we hold about particular social categories. These conditions the way in which we feel it is appropriate to behave towards a person. An interactionist considers social order as a product of our mind. We make ourselves believe that the social world has order and predictability and, by so doing, help to convince each other by our actions that this is indeed the case. Real only for as long as we are able to individually and collectively maintain this belief. In this respect, for as long as people define a situation as real, it will be real in its consequences. The interactionalists suggest that all social interaction involves meanings and interpretations and highlights the way in which the social world is actively constructed, rather than passively experienced as some structuralist perspectives argue, by people going about the process of making sense of the actions of others. In conclusion, social interactionalist considers the following. 1. Meaning itself is not inherent in objects. 2. Human beings act toward things on the basis of the meanings that they have assigned to them. 3. Meaning arises in the process of interaction between people. That is, it takes place in the context of relationships, whether with family or community. 4. Meanings are handled in and modified through an interpretive process used by the person in dealing with things he or she encounters. 5. Once people define a situation as real, it's very real in its consequences. The feminist theory also has some significant role in the shaping of the society in which we know today. The feminist theory suggests that social, political, and economic equality of the sexes should exist. This theory critiques the male supremacy and seeks to suggest means of changing. The aim of the feminist theory is to demonstrate the importance of women in society and reveal that historically women have been subordinate to men. It also seeks to encourage and promote gender equity. Feminist theory fueled the fight for the equality of women and argues that women should share equally in society's opportunities and scarce resources in the 1830s during the abolitionist movement. During this period, the thought that all men and women are equal was being expressed. The contemporary feminism movement began in the 1960s. During this period, free love helped escape the sexual double standard. Divorce became commonplace. Women were happy housewives no more. Higher-level employment and fulfillment outside the home were becoming the norm. To bring about gender equity. Interestingly, there has been several surge of feminist ideology over the years. Elizabeth Cady Stanton and friends organized in 1848 began the cause. This cause was highlighted with a convention to discuss the social, civil, and religious condition and rights of woman at Seneca Falls. They used the Declaration of Independence as the framework for writing a declaration of sentiments. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men and women are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It was the concern of women then that 1. Women were not allowed to vote. 2. Married women had no property rights. 3. Husbands had legal power over and responsibility for their wives to the extent that they could imprison or beat them with impunity. 4. Women were not allowed to enter professions such as medicine or law. 5. No college or university would accept women students. In 1963, Betty Friedan published The Feminine Mystique, documenting emotional and intellectual oppression that middle-class educated women were experiencing because of limited life options. Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act was passed, prohibiting employment discrimination on the basis of sex as well as race, religion, and national origin. The category sex was actually included as a last-ditch effort to kill the bill. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission received 50,000 sex discrimination complaints in the first 5 years. Women's Liberation Movement of the 1960s, 1966, the National Organization for Women organized, soon to be followed by an array of other mass membership organizations addressing the needs of specific groups of women, including blacks, Latinas, Asian Americans, lesbians, and others. During the earlier years, many feminists including Sandra Harding believes that most sociological theories are biased. They believe women are outsiders looking inside. They suggest that females are kept in a distance from the group of progressive individuals made up of males. Females were considered subjective, not given a voice to echo their own opinions and attempt their own experiences without the supervision of a male member of society. Today, women enjoy greater freedom and more opportunities than their counterparts of the past. They are under more cultural pressure to look good. Many feminist theorists believe that an individual is labeled at birth as a member of a sex category, either male or female, and from that point on, is held to acting accordingly. Gender is not something that one has or something that one is, rather, it is something that one does. Feminism can be defined as a social movement and an ideology in support of the idea that a larger share of scarce resources should be allocated to women. Feminists believe that women should enjoy the same rights in society as men and that should share equity in society's opportunities. Regardless of the positions put forward by the feminist theory in reference to the role women should play in society, there are several plausible critiques of the feminist theory. 1. All feminists leave themselves wide open to attack because they themselves are very biased in their approach. 2. Although a commitment to empirical research is not a must in designs of S, most feminists claim that all sociological theories are gender-biased but fail to provide any proof of this claim. 3. Gender is just one variable in human interaction. Many feminists believe that interactions are based solely on gender distinction. 4. When an individual is asked for his or her story, it is always biased from his or her perspective. 5. Critique of feminism comes from within feminist sociological theory itself. The fact that there is such a great variety of sociological feminist theories represents a clear lack of consensus among feminists as to the best means to go about fighting sexism, discrimination, and oppression. 6. Sexism and discrimination exists in nearly all social institutions. 7. Religion is a long-time perpetuator of gender inequality, like Catholic Church forbids females from being priests. 8. Giving a voice to women remains feminist sociological theory's greatest contribution to the field of sociology, specifically in society in general. How does the above-listed and explored sociological theory applies to the Caribbean? The Caribbean region, although dynamic in language and customs, has two things in common. The Caribbean region has a common history and location within this section of the Western Hemisphere. It is evident that with regards to the above stated tenets of all theories listed and discussed above, aspects of each theory can be identified in the Caribbean. Karl Marx, in his theory which sought to describe society as a conflict between the owners of production and the workers, can be vividly identified. Throughout the Caribbean, many large companies are owned and operated under the guidance of the elite of the society. The total number of the elite is few when compared to the mass. The masses, which are the workers, are employed by the elite. The elite do little in the production process, but they are paid the most. The common worker in the line of production is not paid. Evidence also exists to suggest that politicians are in line with the elite and have assisted their efforts to manipulate the poor so as to maintain a status quo. The above described scenario existed during the era of Karl Marx. Today, a similar situation exists in the Caribbean. Attempts have been made by several governments of the regions to control some sections of society. This control have somewhat limited the wholesale manipulation of the entire society by the elite class of the varied Caribbean societies. Many Caribbean governments have heeded to Marx's suggestion, although in part, not in full, the control of society's resources. Many resources throughout the region are owned by the state, example, bauxite in Jamaica, natural gas and petroleum in Trinidad and Tobago. The benefits of the state owning these resources serve the best interest of the varied societies of the region. Aspects of Marx's theory are ignored. Marx believed that the state should manage all resources, include the people, providing for the needs of the people, thus illuminating the problem of unemployment and poverty. Today, only one country within the Caribbean has embraced the Communist Manifesto put forward by Karl Marx. The state manages all opportunities of its citizens. Circumstances do not determine the position one holds in life. The inability to afford tertiary education is not an issue in this country. This is because the state provides education along with other social services to all of those who wishes to pursue their dreams. In Marx's theory, which seeks to establish an equilibrium throughout society, the state or those managing the system of rewards and punishment may end up being the few, elite, who manipulates the assets of production. To believe Marx's theory eliminates inequity and inequality is a fallacy. The lifestyle of those in management position will not mirror the life of those considered as poor. Marx, unlike the functionalist theory put forward by Parsons, disagrees with consensus. Marx believed that many members of society are not educated enough to know what is good and what is not. Thus the idea of democracy is chastised by Marx. Marx suggests a system with one central unit of control having the know-it-all to manage the society. The idea of elected official seems illogical when all is considered about his proposed system. Throughout the Caribbean, slavery was a common feature. The rules and regulations of the society then were set by a common body mirroring that which was suggested by Marx. How society was organized then only benefited one group of individuals. These individuals were the elite planters and owners of large plantations. It took nearly 400 years for this system of governance to end. This system encouraged greater division amongst the masses. To suggest a Karl Marx approach to manage the varied Caribbean societies encourages rebellion and revolt amongst the population of the Caribbean, as they envisage a rebirth of a slavery era regardless of the different construct of social control and management. The functionalist theory seems more credible than Marx. It outlines the fact that everyone has a function in society. It also embraces a sense of consensus. It allows for the masses to decide what is right and what is wrong. The members of society decide on the acceptable values and culture. All members of society decide on the rewards and punishment upheld in each society. Throughout the Caribbean, the adaptation of democracy epitomizes the underlying philosophy of the functionalist theory. You are allowed to help in the decision-making process. Through democratic government election system and the practice parliament, many laws and regulations are set throughout the Caribbean. The values throughout varied Caribbean societies are shared equally amongst its members. It is a given that every single person within each Caribbean has a significant role to play in the economic development of the region. One can agree that with the greatest resource being the people of a country, if managed properly, the region can achieve economic success. The goals of a few cannot surpass the goals of the majority. The dawn of the digital age has created opportunities for the Caribbean region. The introduction of cellular phones, satellite television, internet and cable television has all impacted on the culture shift of the Caribbean region. With the advent of the interactionist theory, clarity can be made on why people behave the way they do throughout the Caribbean. During the early days of industrialization, the influence of the media was not as great as it is today. The access to technology depended on the access to electricity. With the dawn of electricity during the late 1800s, a new era of interaction came into existence. Members of the Caribbean region have been placing great value on how they interact with each other for years. Means of interaction throughout the Caribbean have evolved, stemming from an era of music, dance, drama and storytelling, or just simply communicating through language. Throughout the Caribbean, values are placed on how people interact. During the slavery era, slaves enjoyed singing, dancing, telling stories, drama and just communicate with each other. Today situations have changed. No longer are we, descendants of slave ancestors, limited to menial interaction with each other. Today Caribbean nationals are engaged in new traditions. These traditions include the watching of soap operas, cartoons, the reading of newspapers, browsing the internet, sending emails, sending text messages, Twitter messages and instant messages. These means of interaction have somewhat served their purpose in the holding of many societies together. The meanings associated with several means of communication are not always appreciated by all. Means of interaction are left to the interpretation of those who these messages or symbols were meant for. Evidence of this can be seen in the music world in the Caribbean, which seeks to glorify the use of marijuana, putting it in the same category as cigarette. The music industry has also influenced many black descendants of slavery who once looked down on the markings of the skin as shameful based on its roots in slavery. Today it is seen as art. Many musicians throughout the Caribbean embrace the practice of tattoo and body piercing. Some have even suggested that they discovered that these practices are ancestral and thus seek to interact with such practice as a means of embracing their past. The relationship between many Caribbean societies and the Western civilization, including USA and Europe, has escaped the hurdle of the language barrier. Many computer-based programs have been created which aims to help persons to learn foreign languages from home. Television programs, movies and advertisement have assisted in the interactionalism between societies beyond the boundaries of the Caribbean region. The advent of cable television and the internet have both facilitated the socialization of the mind to adopt varying values which was once seen as a vice. The practice of homosexuality and foreplay between heterosexual couples has their roots in the advent of new interactive technology. Many teenagers have adopted crave for sexual experiment based on their interpretation of movies, advertisements and games views both on the television, internet and on the mobile devices. As a result of the above highlighted issues, it can be labeled as true that aspect of interactionalism can be seen throughout the Caribbean. The mind of the young within the Caribbean society is being swayed from the values and ideals in which several generations of our ancestors have held dearly. No longer are teenagers enthused with the beating of the drums or the cultural expressions shared during special celebrations throughout the region. No longer does teenagers see it necessary to value their bodies as sacred. No longer do teenagers and young adults just rock to the beat. Today, as a result of entertainment viewed on varied devices, mento and ska are replaced by hip-hop and rock. The covering of the body as a mark of respect to those around you is a thing of the past. It is all about bear as you dare. All the above mirrors evidence of interactionalism, which in many instances demoralizes the value system once held by our parents and our parents' parents. To stop the decaying of the society's morals as suggested by Marx would infringe on the right of individuals to express them. The real consequence in participating in this evolution of the Caribbean society is slow but will soon reveal itself. In short order, this philosophy will encourage the repealing of the law which prohibits the practice of homosexual acts. Based on societal position today, the founders of our laws and constitution will soon be considered as old-fashioned or ancient. To a great extent evidence exists in the Caribbean which points to the belittling of women within the region. The feminist movement in the Caribbean has taken steps to sensitize women about their rights and have led several advocacy groups which have spoken on behalf of women throughout the Caribbean on several occasions. Women have taken the charge upon themselves to inform and educate themselves, putting them in league with men whom seek to use their patriarchal strength to manipulate circumstance. For several centuries women had no voice throughout the Caribbean region. Feminism has gathered momentum since the 1960s and ever since have periodically voiced their discontent with their subservient role within society. Spawning from a plantocracy era where all plantations were once owned by men and women was seen but not heard, the Caribbean region have evolved. The era of 1830 fueled the thrust of many women to seek equal opportunities as men. Ever since the opportunity was granted to women to educate themselves and become a part of the labor force, many women have entered what was once men's territory. Women, although not immediately then, was found in many workforce, engineering, owners of production, construction worker, lawyer, political representatives and today leaders of political parties. Although many women throughout the Caribbean have evolved into diverse professions and have become successful, many males have failed to accept this reality change. Many males have become so accustomed to the patriarchal society they have refused to work with female managers, bosses and supervisors. Many females are now viewed on par with their male counterparts. To judge whether or not their work are comparatively the same is within a different context. No longer are females seen as the chamber of reproduction, they are viewed as a contributor to the production of the Caribbean region. Many women are now seeking intellectual upgrade before starting a family. This has decreased the average size of the Caribbean family. With the advent of the feminism theory throughout the Caribbean, several constitutional changes have occurred within several Caribbean states. Women within the Caribbean has equal share in any equity within a union should divorce be filed. It is illegal for husbands to abuse their wives without impunity. Women are now allowed to enter practically all professions including the security forces. Women are free to receive an education. Finally, women in many Caribbean societies are considered the head of the house and the main breadwinner. They are no longer dependent on the man for support, they are independent. In conclusion, this paper sought to explore ways in which aspects of the identified sociological theories can be observed within the sociological organizational structure of the Caribbean society. To place value on only one sociological system as the ideal system would be a retrograde step in Caribbean development. It is believed that no one sociological system exists in any society. It is believed that regardless of how a system seems flawless, several critiques can be validly associated with each. Aspects of all sociological theories can be seen in the Caribbean society. Conflict theory, interactionalism, functionalism/consensus and feminism have their tenets within the framework of the organizational structure of most if not all social system in existence throughout the Caribbean. This paper explored with aptitude of understanding of the aesthetics of Caribbean culture and history and its relations to sociological frameworks.